Okay, so let's talk about something pretty incredible. Every single day, billions of dollars worth of stuff crisscrosses the globe. But how does it all actually work without falling into total chaos? Well, it's all thanks to a kind of secret language, a hidden set of rules that really make global trade possible. Today, we're diving into Incoterms.
So picture this. You've ordered a whole container of goods from halfway around the world. It's out on the ocean, the ship hits a massive storm, and poof, your container goes right overboard. It's a complete loss. So who's on the hook for that? Is it you or is it the seller? The entire answer to that question comes down to just one three-letter acronym in your contract.
You know, before we had these rules, every international deal was basically a minefield. You had different languages, totally different legal systems. It was a mess. The world was crying out for some kind of universal rulebook, a sort of billion-dollar handshake that could bring a little order to all that chaos.
And that's exactly what Incoterms are. They're published by the International Chamber of Commerce, and they are basically the standardized terms that spell out exactly who is responsible for what. They answer all the big questions, like who's arranging the shipping, who's dealing with customs, and, the most important one of all, when exactly does the risk for those goods transfer from the seller to the buyer?
Now, there are 11 different Incoterms, but please don't try to memorize them all. That's the wrong way to go about it. The real key is to think of them not as a list, but as a spectrum, like a sliding scale of responsibility that starts at the seller's factory and goes all the way to your front door.
So let's look at the two ends of that spectrum. On one side, you've got EXW, or Ex Works. Think of this as for pickup only. The seller's only job is to get the goods ready at their warehouse. That's it. Now, a really savvy buyer might want this to get full control over shipping and maybe find a better deal on freight. Then, on the complete other end of the scale, you have DDP, Delivered Duty Paid. This is your all-inclusive option. The seller handles everything, shipping, customs, duties, the whole shebang, right to the buyer's destination. A seller might offer this to make things super easy for the buyer.
And this, right here, this visualizes the whole idea perfectly. Every other Incoterm just picks a specific handover point somewhere along this line, somewhere between the absolute minimum and the absolute maximum seller responsibility. The entire system is built on this simple, sliding scale.
Okay, so if those are the extremes, let's talk about that middle ground. All those other acronyms, they're really just about pinpointing the exact moment that the costs and, more importantly, the risks get handed over from one person to the other.
And this brings us to what is probably the single most important question in any shipment. What is that one crucial moment? It's not when the ship leaves the port, and it's not when it arrives. It's the exact moment that the liability for whatever's in that container officially changes hands.
And that moment has a very specific name, the transfer of risk. This is the absolute heart of Incoterms. It defines the precise point in time and space where if those goods get lost or smashed, it's no longer the seller's problem, it's now the buyer's problem.
Now, what's really fascinating here is just how specific this language is. Let's take one of the most famous terms out there, FOB, or free on board. The risk doesn't transfer when the goods are just sitting at the port, or even when they're sitting next to the ship. No, the risk transfers at the precise moment the goods are physically placed on board that vessel. A second before, it's the seller's risk. A second after, it's the buyer's. It's that precise.
Okay, so we get the idea of risk. But hold on. What about protecting against that risk? What about insurance? I mean, just because the risk is officially passed to the buyer, that doesn't necessarily mean the buyer is the one who has to go out and get the insurance policy.
And this is perfectly shown when you compare two really similar terms, CFR and CIF. With both of these, the seller pays to get the goods onto the ship and covers the freight cost to the destination port. But with CIF, cost, insurance, and freight, that one little letter I adds a huge obligation. The seller also has to buy insurance to cover the buyer's risk during that main journey. As a buyer, you might want this just for the convenience of having it all bundled together.
So to be super clear, out of all 11 Incoterms, only 2 of them require the seller to pay for insurance. That's CIF, which we just talked about for shipping by sea, and its cousin, CIP, or carriage and insurance paid to, which you can use for any type of transport, like a plane or a train.
So this really brings us to the bottom line. Choosing an Incoterm isn't just some boring technical detail you gloss over. It's a huge strategic decision for your business. That one little 3-letter acronym in your contract has a direct impact on your final cost, how much control you have, and how much financial risk you're taking on.
All right, let's actually look at this chart to see how it all fits together. Just follow along with me. If we look at that first column for EXW, you can see the buyer is doing almost everything. Now let's jump over to the next one, FOB. See how the seller's job now extends to getting the goods on the ship? Move to the third column, CIP. The seller now arranges and pays for the main transport and the insurance, but, and this is important, notice that the risk still transfers pretty early on when the goods are handed to the first carrier. And finally, look at that last column, DDP. The seller does it all from beginning to end. You can just see that clear progression of responsibility as we move from left to right.
So why does all this precision matter so much? Well, because, as the source material puts it, ambiguity in these details can lead to disputes over costs, risks, and obligations. Getting this right isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely essential to avoid major problems down the road.
And that leads me to one last, and maybe the most critical rule of all. An Incoterm by itself is incomplete. It's useless. You have to specify the exact location. It's not just FOB. It's FOB, Port of Shanghai. That named place is what gives the rule all its power because it defines the exact geographical spot where everything changes hands. So there you have it, just 11 simple acronyms that are the true backbone of our entire global economy. They define the rules of the game for buyers and sellers in millions of deals every single day. So the only real question left is, if it was your business, your money on the line, which terms would you choose?